This is from Timcast News. Colorado police to respond to 911 calls with drones. RoboCop is here. Terminator, whatever you want to say, the Matrix. We are getting very dangerously close to the dystopian society you don't want to be in. So we look at this article here. If it loads, they are going to respond to 911 calls with drones. Quote here, this really is the future of law enforcement at some point, whether we like it or not. Terrifying, dude, because I really hope not. So it says they're considering using drones to respond to certain 911 calls. Let me make this bigger because you probably cannot read any of this. Okay, that's too big. That's better. And I'll move my big head on the right-hand side so we can all read this. It says, the Denver Police Department has typically resisted using drones, but it's now launching its own program, according to the Denver Post. This really is the future of law enforcement at some point, whether we like it or not. And so Sarah Jeremiah Gates, who leads the drone unit at the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, the city council recently approved steep budget cuts in response to the migrant crisis, which is increased costs for the city. The police department is facing an $8.4 million cut, while the sheriff's office is facing a $4 million cut, or 3.8. The shift to drones could help offset those cuts, allowing police to address certain calls with fewer human personnel. It is going to replace the cops. We already see with the defunding the police. We're going to switch to RoboCops. When it's shoplifting or burglary, grand larceny, some of these smaller cases, you're not going to get an officer that comes and turns out. You're going to hear a oh, there it is, guys. We're down here, and that's where the cop cars are going to go. It's crazy. Pooh Perfect saying they want us all to go electric vehicles for a reason, and it's not for sustainability. No, it's not. It provides a lot more control. But the thing is even a lot of these newer gas models in these vehicles, they have kill switches built into them. I think it's essentially every vehicle that's been made from 2014 and on is designed with a kill switch, whether it's electric or not. That's terrifying, dude. Why? Did we vote on this? I mean, maybe it was pushed along with some ridiculous omnibus bill that's stacked in between page 496 and page 497 that no one to this day has ever read because politicians don't even read the bill. Could be. But it goes on. At least 20 Colorado law enforcement agencies use drones for certain things, like searching for missing people, or providing overhead surveillance during SWAT operations. Now, missing people would be a good use of them. I could see that even regardless of the reasoning. But the way they preface this article being well, we should really get into drones because we can't have that many officers. And so it's more of a replacement than it is an addition. I think it would be cool to have it as an addition, but it shouldn't entirely outright replace a police force. That is so dystopian, dude. And it's could you imagine you're dying and your last hope is to hope that this stupid drone that gets sent to you doesn't jam or something happen like that? That's crazy to me, man. And I would never want to ever be in that position. We have Pooh Perfect again. I think drones could work better for both parties. Less force and safer tracking. Cons is privacy and potentially massive spying without a warrant. So that's the thing. As I further read into this, most departments have had to go through a process in which that there is a warrant is required. Now, I'm not sure if it was a state case or if it was a federal case, but at least in Ohio, so I'm in Ohio, and I'll take that. You might need to check in your area. They do require a warrant before a drone can begin to surveil, whether it's in someone's home, from the sky, bird's eye view. They are required to get a warrant. So we at least do have that going. But Blue Perfect also says, this is a hit or miss realistically, but it's always abused at some point. It's true. It is true. And it will be abused. We know it will be abused. What reasons do we have to believe that it's not going to be abused in whatever way? But this article continues, and that's the thing too. The overhead surveillance, that would be cool. I mean, that's what we see in Blade Runner, right? He pops the top of his car, and it just kind of watches his car and does surveillance. That's cool. That's an addition, but that doesn't outright replace an officer. For it to outright replace an officer, you're gonna have to equip it. You're gonna have to armor it. You're gonna have to but then now we have to go into, well, what's the robot's rights? What's the robot allowed to do and what it can't do to a person? And then that opens a huge can of worms that I don't think the current geriatric 95-year-olds who are in Congress should at all be dealing with, dude. We need, no way, dude. This needs to be adjudicated in some way outside of the realm of 75-year-olds touching it, because it's going to be really, really, really rough to get them to understand some of these abstract ideas when it comes to robot rights and providing a Bill of Rights for robots, i.e., essentially when it comes to, can a robot shoot a human? Are we going to permit robots to shoot humans? Who will be charged for, who will be considered the killer of said human, right? Is the robot going to be killer? Is it going to be the person who is operating the robot? So on and so forth. But Perfect also says, I wonder how this works with homes with airspace rights, but I guess warrants counters that. Yeah, I would imagine so. I would imagine a warrant just blatantly. I mean, if a bench warrant can essentially allow an officer to enter your home, I would imagine a drone warrant would allow you to just essentially, go into someone's airspace. If we hit the robot, do we get a felony? I would imagine. But these are going to be questions, right? Like, it'll probably be charged. Like, it'll be vandalism. Will it be what a destruction of property? Yeah, destruction of public property. And that's I believe. I mean, a lot of times they're just felonies depending on the level of financial damages. But two, I mean, if it's a robot, I imagine one punch on that thing, it's like you just broke. That's $2,500 right there, dude. To get a bionic armory attached on that thing, that's gonna be really expensive. And so I imagine it would be an automatic felony to do that. Are you allowed to defend yourself against a robot? You are. I think that you should be. You're right to self-defense no matter what. But then I think, what rights are they going to try to give the robots? Right? Because we already currently have an issue right now where the cops are allowed, the special immunity provisions, which essentially allow them, to kill with a badge a lot of the time. And I just find it egregious and disgusting. But if the robots are allowed these same principles and rights, like, I think it's going to get very, very dark very, very quickly. But let's continue back to the article. The article says, across the U.S., there are already 1,400 police departments using drones in some way. 1,400. And I imagine they're few and far between. I imagine that there are going to be some of the more nicer ones that have more money to spend, that are the ones that are doing early on. I imagine they'd be the ones that bought maybe a fleet of like 2 or 3 drones to do surveillance or testing with. That number will probably definitely grow, especially given the fact that there are all of these cuts happening to the police force. Drones can be used to surveil the location of an incident and provide live video to responding officers. Drones providing real-time situational awareness early after a 911 call can reduce the number of officers needed to respond to a call. So again, the way this article is framing this thing is like, we can do it less with cops and rely more on the robots, less than the robots being an accessory to help progress through whatever means is required for whatever context of the situation is happening, or whatever incident that it may be. In 2022, Colorado officials released a report on a drone program launched a year earlier. The program used drones to investigate fatal and felony crashes. After using remote-controlled drones to investigate 331 scenes, officials determined drone usage saved 168 hours of work, a 56% reduction in on-scene investigation hours. Again, this is framed in what it can do and how it can help there be less police officers present. I think this is the direction it's going to move. And I think you're going to get people who are blindly believers in defunding the police on the left, who would much rather it be a robot without, understanding even the slightest of what that possibly brings about, let alone the abstract, the rights position, but just the fact that they hate, probably, I would imagine that they just hate white men so much to a point in which they didn't care what it was, as long as it just wasn't a white male that was approaching them to arrest them. Now, a lot of it, there could be race added to it, but some of it might not even be race. It might even just be by the fact of seeing a masculine man in a police outfit is enough to send trauma responses to people, that they would rather a robot come and march in and pull a hole through your wall because they just have this ridiculous, outlandish position. Possibly, who knows? But again, let's continue. The quote here says, I could fly the drone over a reported suspicious vehicle and say, hey, that vehicle is not out of place. And I never had to send an officer over to bother them, and I can clear it with that. It's saving resources. In another example, Gates explained a drone could be flown to a reported broken traffic light and send video to an operator who would determine if the light is working properly and remedy the issue without sending an officer to the scene. Every single one of these is how we can get it to not have an officer be at the scene. How can the robot replace what the human is doing? We have Kukla in here. And isn't it ironic? It's the exact inverse. It's the jab that are the threats to us. I think you're a little behind, Kikla, but yes, I do agree with you, right? Um, it's kind of wild to think that, yeah, well, especially with the jab question in particular, with what Kukla's saying in the chat, which would be the DNA changing genome, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Insert bannable offense from YouTube here. But the article continues. What if we get a call about someone with a gun and the drone is able to get overhead and see if it's not a gun before law enforcement ever contacts them? He said. This is all I can get the portion of what it's meaning by when it's saying they want to keep police officers out of harm's way. I get that argument slightly, but I don't understand it given the fact that the fabric of the job is literally being involved in dangerous situations. It's one of my biggest issues with the way that police forces just operate entirely, which is like if you know what the job is and you sign and you take the oath, I think that you should sacrifice immunity because otherwise you should only be in this position if you are capable of making the best decisions that are required. Now, obviously mistakes can happen, but I think that justice would be better served if the mistakes do happen, that the family members aren't the consequential members of said incident or said mistake being made. You got to do away with these things like qualified immunity and so on and so forth, right? Like you shouldn't allow them to be able to just essentially get away with all of these logistical things. And for one, no cop should be able to turn off their body cam. That is insane to me. But Kukla's saying, let me go back up here because I can't read it. Saying, shedding their cooties all over us. Yeah, we don't say a word towards them. We knew it all along. My fear is not what we went through, but that these same mindsets, aka a lower functioning tier, will be doing a rinse and repeat with the next pandemic. They didn't learn a thing. And it's a true possibility. And honestly, speaking of, and so again, terrifying stuff with the drones, but you're on point with exactly what you said with is the next pandemic, which it may already possibly be here. So let's go to this. This is again from Timcast News. Oh, let me read this comment here. Well, the drone is remotely controlled and from a live feed. Wouldn't think it's fully automated, would be too expensive for that. However, this drone concept comes from the military and IDF. So it's just gamifying military actions on civilians. And it's a disconnection, right? And you're right on that too, because it's like a hardcore disconnection. And the hardcore disconnection is now like, instead of, you having to actually like be in person, feel the adrenaline, like you're in the moment, you're like, oh, okay. It's not there anymore. It's, I'm piloting it like with like my headset on. It is a game to them, right? It's essentially you're just playing an FPS. You're playing Call of Duty, but with real people and real stakes. Only the fact that you get to sit in your chair and not even have to worry about it. Terrifying, dude. It really is. But let me go to the next pandemic, which was Kukla's talking about, which is it may already be here.